Would you like to know how to turn this into this? In this video I'm going to show you how to make your own delicious wine at home using 5 simple and easy to follow steps. Okay, so before we get started, let's have a look at some of the basic equipment you're going to need. So firstly, you're going to need a fermenting vessel such as this one here, which holds a minimum of 23 litres, and as you can see it's got the screw cap with the airlock and rubber bowl. I also recommend getting a second 5-gallon fermenter for when you need to transfer your wine. You'll need a source of constant heat such as this heater tray. You could also use a heater belt which wraps around the outside of the fermenting vessel, or if you have a constant temperature of around 70 degrees Fahrenheit in your home, that would do equally as well. In addition to the fermenting bins, a long-handled plastic food grade quality stirring spoon is very useful, as is also a similarly food grade plastic funnel. A section of siphon tube about 2 meters in length. Here attached to it is a siphon clip which controls the flow of liquid, and this clip here enables you to attach the siphon tube to the side of the fermenting vessel to keep it stable. And finally, this bit here attaches to one end, and that sits above the sediment in the fermenting vessel, which then prevents the sediment from being drawn back up when you're siphoning off the finished wine. You'll also need a glass thermometer for taking the temperature of the must. Though not absolutely necessary, I'd highly recommend a hydrometer for testing the specific gravity of the wine, which goes into a plastic trial jar. And I'd also recommend, again not absolutely necessary but really useful for when you want to transfer the wine into the jar to test the gravity, is a plastic pipette tube or something similar like that. You'll also need a method of sanitising all the equipment you're going to use. Here I'm using VWP, but I believe there's other proprietary ones out there such as Star San, just whatever you can get hold of for your local homebrew store or online. And when you're making wine from supermarket fruit juice, such as I'm going to in this video, you'll need wine yeast, pectolytic enzyme, some Camden tablets, some yeast nutrient, and perhaps some citric acid, such as this one. It's a large tub. And finally, you'll need something to put the wine in once it's finished fermenting and it's cleared, so you can use a standard 750ml wine bottle, such as this screw cap one here. They're perfectly adequate. Or latterly I've come to quite enjoy using these bag-in-box, and again they are freely available online. Now that might seem a lot of equipment, but don't worry, because you'll easily recuperate the cost of that equipment with your first batch of wine. So let's get started. Firstly, get 7 pints of water onto the boil. If you live in an area where you're not sure about the purity of your tap water, then I'd recommend boiling the whole quantity of water and then allowing it to cool to around 20 to 25 degrees C. Next, add 3.6 kilos of ordinary white granulated sugar. While the sugar is dissolving in the water, take 10 litres of fruit juice. Here I'm using 5 litres of apple juice and 5 litres of a fruit juice mix. This will give you a nice white wine. Pour it straight into the fermenter. You can see the sugar is dissolved, so now I'm going to add 5 teaspoons of citric acid. I'm also going to add 5 teaspoons of yeast nutrient. Now add the hot sugar solution straight into the fermenter. Now's a good time to get your heating sorted out, and here you can see I've got the heater tray plugged in, ready to go. Now, using a glass thermometer which has been sanitised, take the temperature of the liquid. Now top up the fermenter to the 23 litre mark, making sure the final temperature is somewhere between 20 and 25 degrees centigrade. Once you've topped up the fermenter to 23 litres, take the temperature again. This is really critical. Too hot and the yeast will die. Too cold, the yeast will not activate. The fermenting vessel is now sat on the heater tray, and I'm going to add some pectolase or pectolytic enzyme, and this sachet will do a batch of up to 25 litres, so it will easily cover this one. So we just sprinkle it on. There's no need to stir it in, and we're going to leave that for about 4 hours to let it do its job before we pitch the yeast. So now it's been 4 hours since we added the pectolase, so now I'm going to add the yeast, and this is I prefer to use Gervin universal wine yeast, but you can use any universal white wine yeast, would do the job. And again, we just sprinkle it on. There's no need to stir in. And now all we have to do is wait for bubbles to start coming through the airlock. So we refit the lid and just wait for bubbles to come through the airlock, which will indicate primary fermentation has started. So when you put the lid on, put it on nice and tight, make sure the bung's well down, and then we'll come back when fermentation has started. So it's about 20 hours since I pitched the yeast, and you can see bubbles now coming through the airlock. You might notice also I've put a fleece, actually wrapped it around the fermentation vessel, because the ambient temperature in the house is pretty cool. We don't have the heating on too much, just a couple of times a day. So in order to try and maintain the heat for optimum fermentation, sometimes it helps if you just do something like that. So all we need to do now is just keep an eye on the passage of CO2 through the airlock. It'll probably increase in activity for a few days and then start to slow down. And the indication when fermentation is complete is when no more bubbles are coming through, but that's when we need to use our hydrometer to take a gravity reading. So we're about 6 hours since I did the last shot. I just wanted to show it quickly again, because you can see the bubbles coming through now at a rate of knots. It's really going for it. That's a really good vigorous fermentation. And if I just adjust this camera slightly and we remove, I'm going to put that fleece back on. I'm not sure if can you make out you can sort of see it through the wall of the fermenter. There's a nice sort of froth there going on, but really, as I say, the activity going through that airlock is brilliant. That's exactly what we want. It's now 13 days since the yeast was pitched, and there's very little activity now. There's about 1 bubble a minute going through the airlock. So now it's really a good time to test the specific gravity of the wine to see if there's any sugar left in it. So to test the wine, I'm going to use this plastic pipette tube, or sometimes they call a wine thief, to transfer the wine from the fermenter into my sanitised trial jar. The hydrometer's already in there. So we've transferred the wine. Now all you do is take your hydrometer and drop it into the wine, spinning it at the same time. The reading on the hydrometer is 0990 or 990, so we're well below the 1000. So that tells us that the sugar has virtually all been used up in the fermentation, and we're safe to proceed to the next step. Next, we add 5 Camden tablets to the wine must, which we need to crush these, and the easiest way I've found of doing that is to put them in a piece of paper and then use the back of a spoon. You could use a pestle and mortar, but this is the way I do it. So once crushed, they should look like that. Now just tip those into the wine and stir with your sanitised plastic spoon. Don't forget to turn the heater tray off. Now we need to degas the wine, and here I'm using a plastic wine whip, and that's been sanitised and it's in a cordless electric drill. You can use the plastic stirring spoon to stir it vigorously. It's much easier using one of these. So after stirring vigorously for about 3 minutes, refit the lid with airlock and leave for 24 hours. So it's been 24 hours since we sulphited and degassed the wine. Don't know if you can make that out, but on the surface of the wine there's nothing now. It's all, the stuff that was there yesterday has all started to gravitate towards the bottom, so it is clearing, and in fact it probably would clear if I just left it and did nothing. But because this is meant to be a fast turnaround wine, I like to add finings. Now this particular brand I'm using here, as you'll see, it's got a sachet marked A and a sachet marked B. So all we do is cut down the middle here, pour the contents of sachet A into the fermenter, give it a stir with a sanitised spoon, and then about 2 hours later we come back and add the contents of sachet B, and that's the finings added. Then we just leave the wine for another day or two to see how it's cleared. Gentle stir. That's fine. We'll come back 2 hours later and add the other one. 2 hours has now elapsed since we added the first sachet of finings, and if I show you a different shot, I'm hoping you'll see that they're working already. Looking down towards the bottom of the fermenter, you should be able to make out the line of sediment that's already collecting. So here is sachet B going in. Again, just a quick gentle stir with our sanitised spoon. Replacing the lid with airlock, and we'll come back in 24 hours.